first and foremost, we want to thank everybody that has showed up to our Masterclass Australia edition. Us and our team have been traveling around the world for over 2 years now, trying to obviously learn and experience the different type of initiatives that are going on with different companies and our partners that we've been working with to figure out what's going on in this hybrid world and workplace and obviously real estate space, and offering obviously a solution to the issues that are being attained by returning to the office place. And obviously we have two individuals here with me that have done the most when it comes to obviously learning and experiencing the different things that I've had to be learned in the workplace experience field. They've spoken with many executives in this field and learned an immense amount of information that is really well needed to continue to push forward on this envelope of innovation and in this workplace experience world that we all are calling hybrid. So it's safe to say that Smart Spaces, which has been around for now 5 years, is making a lot of noise in this realm and in this world. And it's a big testament to the hard work of, like we see here, Dinesh Malkani and Jason McAloon. To introduce our team here today, this is Dinesh Malkani, our founder and CEO. Dinesh has founded Smart Spaces about 5 years ago now, and has led us to become the leader in digital workplace initiative and smart building technology space. We've taken our technology to over 30 countries and offices all over the world, right, worldwide. And prior to Smart Spaces, Dinesh was actually the president of Cisco India. And then alongside Dinesh is our VP of Global Sales, Jason McAloon. He's worked with numerous Fortune 500 companies all over the world. And he's actually based in the US now, but has done research all over the world to continue to learn what is needed in these specific times all over the world in the workplace experience field. And then last but definitely not least, myself, I am a business development consultant here at Smart Spaces, and I'll be your moderator today, William Abreu. I'll make sure that I get all the questions and make sure I ask them in a timely fashion and make sure they're answered for everybody towards the end of our master class. So without further ado, I'm going to open the floor for Dinesh, and he's going to give us a little bit more information of his learnings and his views on what is happening in this brand new market.
Super. Hey, thank you, Willie, and thank you, everybody. This is the Australia chapter, and really welcome, right? So today, I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, but look forward to an interactive discussion. Would love to get your questions. The data I'm going to show you today is a sum total of everything we have gathered globally. We've done a lot of deployments all over the world. And I think now that we've had about 3 or 4 months of people coming back, we have very good perspectives that we want to share with you. I have traveled around, met many customers, visited their locations and sites, and try to gather quite a few insights, including we just got the latest Australia data as well, right? So the first thing, I'd call it sort of what's top of mind, right? So the first thing that is top of mind is that the employees clearly want to work out of the office, right? They want to work out of the office, but for a specific reason. They want to collaborate, they want to build connections. And that's probably been the single most important reason on why they want to get back to work. We have seen basically over time a correlation between the number of people coming in, the number of guests being booked, and the number of meeting rooms and collaboration spaces being booked. And what's interesting is that the number of collaboration spaces being booked is probably 50%. That means at least 50% of the people coming back are making the bookings, and I'm sure a lot of people are joining them as well, right? And I think that data just shows us that they get back, they want to collaborate, and they want to spend time with each other. The second sort of data point that we have seen is that people, before they come to work, what they try and do is they try and check if their colleagues are coming back to work. The utilization on that has been going up. So, it's very interesting to see the data that they'll always check who else is coming in. Some have set up the ability to nudge each other. So if I'm coming in, I want to make sure, for example, if I want to know that Jason and Willie are going to be coming to the office, I want that I should be getting that data beforehand, or I should be able to search, right? When we spoke to our clients, they said that in the beginning, a lot of people didn't understand that, but over time, I think that's like the first data point they use to make the decision. And that's really interesting. You correlate the room data and you correlate the nudge data, and it starts to match up. That's the first thing that they are sort of looking at. And obviously from our perspective, right, we know that even in Australia, Mondays and Fridays are a little low on attendance. Wednesdays tends to be a little bit higher. Data is showing us Monday, Friday, across our client base, the average occupancy is about 10%, and it goes all the way up to 40 to 50% on a Wednesday. So you've got to figure out, while they want to come and collaborate, they're still trying to squeeze all of that in basically the middle 3 days, right? And I'll share with you certain information basically around that. Another learning we had was that obviously, the employees, they like to connect with like-minded folks within their own organization. The creation of interest groups has been absolutely fantastic. We started this initiative, I'd say about 4 or 5 months ago, and just the number of people that are joining those interest groups, because people's lifestyles changed during COVID, right? Many of them moved out, many of them had access to bicycle tracks, and many of them got in pets and things like that. So what keeps them connected with the organization and their colleague is a common interest, right? So we've seen very high utilization basically on that. The other thing that we're also observing is that when people come back, they have this tendency to sit next to each other. See, these were all theoretical things that were talked about, but this is now becoming reality. Many companies that we work with, for example, if they had like 3 floors, they would only try and keep 1 floor open, get that filled up, make sure that people, are closer to each other. They bump in at the coffee machine, they try to sit closer to each other, and then try to open up the 2nd floor so that, it's not as if you've got 10 people sitting on the top and you have 2 people sitting on the ground floor, right? So the ability to do that, I think, has worked out for many organizations, because when people come back, they don't want that feeling that, I'm the only one in the office, or that I've got that big dark area out there, right? They want to get the feeling that there's a lot of buzz going on, that, people are back, that they are, being able to just have offline sort of conversations. Because right now everything's scheduled, right? Oh, I look at my calendar and it's like Zoom call, Zoom call, Zoom call. And so when they get back to work, they should have these ad hoc discussions, right? That's one thing that we've also learned. I think the second is that when we surveyed our client base and we looked at the employees, especially the ones that had newly come into the workforce, they were really motivated to get back to collaborate, but more importantly, they wanted to have learning experiences. They said, we've been assigned mentors in the organization, we have buddy systems, but then, when we come, we want to make sure that we know that they are going to be there, so that we can get on their calendar, we can go and have conversations with them, we can have learning experiences, right? And certainly that was another feedback that we got, and typically something that one should factor in as we think about the hybrid workplace. Our sort of experience also was that it's not just about how the employees are thinking about it, right? But you've got to then be able to make sure that the workplace itself encourages, and basically the necessary changes have been made so that it drives that collaboration. If people prefer sitting next to each other, how are you creating your zones? How is the cafeteria? I mean, does it, encourage people to sort of come in and bump into each other? Do you have enough, 2-seaters and 4-seaters? Have you, taken some clients we work with, they said they had their large meeting rooms that they felt were not needed, and they cut it up into smaller areas of pods that they had created with like a small little screen, because they still felt that even there's like a couple of us having a conversation, some people don't want to go into indoor meeting rooms, and so they wanted to have collaborations on the open floor, but maybe they've got some colleagues that are sitting at home and they just want to kind of bring them in, right? So giving them the ability to do that. But there is definitely reconfiguration work that is going on to enable the fact that, you know, they have a high degree of opportunities for the employees to be able to collaborate with each other, right? So this was the first sort of data point that we captured as we started to look at the information that we have gathered and from essentially our clients. I think the second thing, which is second learning that we've had, which has been very important, is that, look, you know, let's face it, we all have had lifestyle changes, right? I've started biking. I go out on the track here. And so when I think about now, as I have to go back to work, do I have enough time to bike? And maybe the answer is not. And so I'd like to bike to work. But if I'm biking to work, then are there bicycle racks that are present? Because many people bought expensive bikes, right? Some of the bikes went up to like $8,000 and $10,000. And so is there a place for me to properly lock and park my bike, right? Do I have enough racks in the office? Some people have bought electric cars. It's a big movement, and I think that's going to keep changing. But then do I have enough EV charging points inside of the parking lot? And many people moved out of the suburbs, so their commuting distance has just gone up quite a lot. So even if they come in for 2 to 3 days a week, their commuting distance, if it was like 20, 25 kilometers, now maybe like 40, right? And so if they have EV cars, is that supported inside of the offices that you have? But those kind of criteria, which we didn't have to think about really, right, in the past, I think you've got to think about, right? There's a building that I visited recently, and they've signed up with us. They had, I think, about 2,500 employees that were coming into that location. They had 1,600 desks, and they had 700 parking lots. They had it all figured out. And in the first week, the feedback that came was, it's great you have 700 parking lots, but you only have like 25 EV chargers, right? And they had almost 150 people. And so a lot of people coming in said it would have been great if I could have known, is it even available? If it's available, you know, can I use it? Because otherwise I wouldn't have kind of got my car, right? So the same way with the bicycle racks, right? Do you have plenty of them? What's the size of that? I think gathering that data and information, but appreciating the fact that the post-pandemic lifestyle has to be supported and the necessary workplace changes are essentially being made, right? So those were some of the things that we have observed. Many people went and bought pets, right? So they've got pets into the home. And so which means that, you know, that's a lifestyle change. There's this thing that we learned, and I don't know if you all feel it, but I'd love to get some comments on the chat group. But couples on a Sunday evening, particularly working couples, sit down together and say, okay, so who's going to look after the pet if both of us are at work? I've got flexibility for 3 days a week, and you know, you've got flexibility maybe for 2 days. Can we schedule? Can we plan out our schedule, right? Can we discuss on what days are you going into work versus what days am I going into work? If they get that right, they're happier. If they get that wrong, there's this kind of grumbling that is going on at home, because, you know, also a lot of babies were born during the last 2 years. And so we've got to think about that. Like, what impact does that have to the employee? And what impact is that going to create at the workplace? At the workplace, many of them have put in creches, right? There's this big thing around getting pets to work. You know, also looking at, I talked about interest groups. One of the clients we have, they have this every week, one day where you can bring your pet to work. But that interest group has been driving these kind of initiatives. But for sure, it encourages people to be able to get back, and they feel pretty good about the workplace, which is just not my desk and I got to work all the time. You know, I can pursue my lifestyle changes that I have made. I think food's becoming really important. People are making healthier choices. People are making, obviously there's a big thing around plant-based diets and other things that people have experimented with. When they come back to work, there are two challenges that they see. The first is they don't get their food choices necessarily. That's number one. And the second challenge is that, look, at the end of the day, food has become expensive. What used to be maybe $8 for a sandwich is now costing them $13. So what can you do about that, right? Because they still want to eat, that kind of food. And so some companies, they've negotiated offers with restaurants around in the precinct where, okay, for a certain set of employees, if they show their ID or whatever it is, they get like a 15-20% discount. Those are proactive efforts that companies are definitely taking. Some are offering better food choices at the workplace. And when you really see the cost of this, honestly, I mean, for the companies that have done it, they've told us it cost them nothing, literally, right? It was very inexpensive. It was just effort they had to do. And of course, the transparency had to be offered back to the employees. The changes had to be done to the workplace. But the smile it brought, the satisfaction it brought, there have been employees that have gone back and started talking to other people saying, hey, I work at this cool place. I'm back to work. I got a bicycle rack. I sometimes take my pet in, I've got a crash. I figured out my food choices that I want. Some companies know that, the gym routines had changed during the pandemic. And so, well, are there gyms around your workplace, or can you create a small exercise area within your own workplace? But those are considerations and things that you want to have. One more learning was on these desks. While, of course, you got great chairs in the office and everything else, I think a lot of people change their schedule. They like to stand and they like to work. Now, if I'm getting used to that at home, and if I'm very productive because of that, because, I like to now stand and work, and 2 years was a long time, then can I have those choices inside of the office, right? And so the ability to offer that, the ability to look for the right kind of desk, those are the kind of things companies are doing to be able to change based on this new post-pandemic lifestyle. And the more you can support it, I think the better it's going to be, right? Another learning that we had was that, look, there is no one size fits all. And I think this is the challenge of the hybrid world. In the past, it was one size fits all. Everybody gets a desk, everybody gets a chairs, great. However, in today's world, right, when we think about flexibility, there's a lot of work done in this area, and some of our clients have done a really good job. What they did was they took their pool of all the employees and started to create personas, right, inside of their organization. So in this case, Mandy, recent college graduate, lives in the city, packed into a small apartment, 3 roommates, very noisy, loves to go to work. Okay, one thing from a need perspective is wants that 1 day of flexibility, but 4 days in the office, and wants to learn. So creating that environment of letting them come in 4 days and giving them 1 day at home, but at the same time, the learning opportunities, the mentoring opportunities, the buddy system, I think those things become important. There's one client of ours who went to the extent of creating quiet rooms because they said that at home it was so noisy that when they're coming to the office, they want to be in quieter areas. For some of them, others were just used to being quiet at home. And so creating those zones became super critical, right? Here's Maria, worked in the company for 10 years, senior level person, has moved out to the suburbs, at home, it's a bigger home, has her own home office, and obviously, but still wants to come back to meet her team. She's a manager, she's got a team, wants to meet certain clients, 2 days in the office, 3 days work from home. How do you balance the need for her ability to give her collaboration areas, rooms that she may need? And she's in the outskirts, which means she's going to drive. She may have bought an electric car, but those are the kind of things you need to focus on for Maria. And in this case, Mike, right, he lives in the suburbs, single parent, 2 kids, sees huge benefit from working from home, has got responsibilities. and wants to fluctuate the schedule. So look, there'll be personas, right? But the ability to create spaces that match these personas and create through technology and through space design, the ability to make this flexible, right? Recently, I visited a client of ours in Charlotte. They have these desks that now have wheels underneath them. And the reason they've done it is because they should be able to move them around. And it's offering them a completely next level of flexibility. And of course, technology, right? Just to make sure that they have, depending on the type of scenario, they've got what they need. The most important thing is productivity, satisfaction, and of course, it gives you the ability to manage your spaces much better, right? So we talked about the employees, we talked about the organization, right? We polled our customers and said, what's the one thing that's important for you, right? They said, of course, productivity and things like that, but a thriving culture. They want the culture back, right? And so some of our clients are doing a lot of in-person events. And, so this was interesting data, which was, well, what kind of events? In the beginning, it was free food. Well, that dies out very, very quickly. After 1 week, really nobody cares, right? Some said it's just, we bring in, we do these comedy shows, we do other things. But the one thing that drove the maximum attendance across majority of our client base in terms, and of course, we looked at the data as well coming through our system, was learning workshops. People want to learn. If you have an in-person event, you do a learning workshop, a lot of people show up. And of course, they've got to be meaning learning workshop. It's not just about learning for them, or from the speaker. It's also learning opportunities from your colleagues. It's seeing what kind of questions they ask. I think the world of Zoom, we have these little boxes that kind of made it a little bit challenging, right? In-person town halls, the frequency of the town halls, companies used to do quarterly, they moved it monthly. I think seeing the senior management, having conversations with them, etc., makes a huge difference. Surveys, there's nothing as too many surveys. I think knowing the pulse is important, and I'll tell you why. Things are changing so rapidly. We just came off with all these rule changes and lockdowns and things like that. There's certainly newfound freedom. Survey, constant surveys and getting the feedback. And surveys does not mean just general surveys for the whole location. It could be small departments within surveys. It could be surveys of personas. It could be surveys of interest groups, but really getting the pulse of what's actually going on and the agility to be able to do that, right? But also, I think what's important to create that thriving culture is these physical spaces, right? When you walk in, it should give you the vibe to re-energize yourself, to be able to do these social engagements, to be able to connect with each other. Some of our customers are organizing one day, typically a Monday, because they know Monday attendance is low, office tours. And why they're doing it is, during the last 2 years, a lot of new people joined and, etc. But it's office tour with a meet and greet. Everybody introduces themselves. This constant process of doing that so nobody gets left behind, but it does drive a thriving culture, right? The no-no on what we also learned was vacant floors. So that's why I think restacking your space, if you do think that only 50% or 60% of people, which is what our data is showing us, by the way. I looked at the Australia data this morning. I want to thank Varun for that. Attendance is typically at a high 40 to 50%. And it happens on a Wednesday, right? Monday, Friday, it's like 10%. Now, you've got to make sure that even the 10, 15, 20% coming in, no, on vacant floors, those are things that we have learned employees just don't like, still gives them the feeling of loneliness, like, why am I here? And the other thing is just the thing of, because very few people coming in, sitting all day inside of the room. So the ability to kind of make sure that they're connecting with each other, make sure colleagues are coming back in groups, even if you have to drive it, I think becomes important. But once you have the data, once you have the personas created, obviously you all have, some form of technology or whatever, being able to connect them is an exercise, but it's an exercise worth it, because if they usually find that these, they come back in groups, or motivation level, productivity level, just their feeling, and if you re-energize the spaces, absolutely fantastic, right? Another thing which we found was some employees view this as toil, right? So the ability to explain it in a way. So somebody told me, I said, why is your check-in high? Because in some customers, we were seeing just digital check-ins were high. And in some customers, we were seeing that bookings were happening, but they were getting canceled. How do you drive adoption? Firstly, look at the data. I think the data is very, very important, right? But also, how you communicate that. Change management is very, very critical in this whole thing. We attended a town hall where somebody said, their CEO actually picked up and said, how many of you in this room want to come to work and be the only person at the office? And everybody was like, nobody. He said, exactly. That's why you need technology. So how many of you want to come in and you kind of want to basically sit down at a space, go into the restroom and come back and figure out somebody else took it? And everybody said, no, that's why you need technology. I think the ability to communicate that becomes hugely important. But this whole thing of overwhelming them with tech, giving them like so many things to work with, I think that's a problem. Now, there is no sort of answer for it in reality. You've got to work towards that. You've got to define a journey. You've got to think about what are all the things that are needed, right? I visited one of our clients in Chicago, and what they had done was they had kind of figured a way out how to glue all of this together. Really cool work they did. At some point in time, if you're interested, we can obviously get them to speak, essentially speak to all of you, right? Transport, to all the things in their precinct, to all the things inside of their offices. It was something that they were thinking, moving from it's toil to, hey, this is what's going to make me have, most importantly, a stress-free day at the office, right? That was the key. And I think that worked out pretty well. So you've got to give a lot of thought into making sure it's not overwhelming for the employees and bring it really nicely together, right? And tell them for all the reasons. Data is gold. So it's interesting. Some of the companies we work with, they are really looking at their data almost every day. And they've created this notion of strategic insights. They don't call it data anymore, but having a view of having split everything into personas, into departments. What is happening by persona? What is happening by department? Which events are people attending? What kind of people are coming back? Can we do something for, we always think of general, but it's never about general. It's about these little groups. It's about these baby steps, and it's about these little wins that I think make all the difference, right? But the data tells you that. What percentage is hybrid remote in the office, the employee sentiment through surveys, the whole department-wise tracking. One of the things was manager training. Some companies, they did a few things. One is they hired a community manager to drive all this. Like I said, re-energize your space. And they felt there were specialists that would do that, right? So that was one. That was based on the data. Now, did that make a difference? Since the person come in 1 week later, did that drive any changes? Can we think of different things? The other thing one company realized was they said, why is it that some departments are seeing high levels of productivity, higher levels of people getting back, higher level of employee satisfaction in the surveys, people remaining connected to work and their lifestyle. But why is it that others are not? The data will give you that, right? And so what they did was they figured it was about some managers and how they were doing it. They created this notion of best practices and had those managers deliver these best practices to all the other people so that they could start looking at unified views on how this could be managed, right? And I think these insights are the one which also, look, at the end of the day, you just think about this, right? Workplace policy. It was very different in January, very different in March, it's very different in May. June is like, I know in Australia it's getting colder, so it could have a different meaning, but you've got to be agile, right? Workplace policies are being changed rapidly, right? Of course, some are doing it on Twitter, but I won't go there. But basically, the whole notion of updating the workplace policy driven by data is something which I think is really helping companies. They have been able to, they've decided in their head that this is not a policy for the next 1 year. They're going month or quarter at a time. they're looking at the data, they're putting all the things in place, making the changes in their workplace, making the changes in sort of the information they have. But it's working, and it takes time, it takes effort, but it works. The other thing is, there's no doubt that people have, through the pandemic, I would say averagely, if we look at our client base across all the locations, probably consolidated space cost by about 20 to 30%. And they looked at their booking data, and we are seeing the data like climb so rapidly, right? So we looked at all the data sources that we had, but basically monitoring your footfall, looking at the booking patterns. So it was interesting. A lot of people are starting to encourage their employees to plan for the future. So they're saying, guys, if you and this is something you won't get 100% right, but can you all think about the next 30 days, the next 60 days, or the next 90 days? Because that just helps you better if you have future data. One is the historical, but I think future data does make a difference. And I think that's really important, right? Now, as the consolidation has happened, like I gave you this example, 3,000 employees, 1,640 desks, 700 parking lots. And so how do you squeeze all that into a space without people really feeling that it made any difference, right? That's the key, because if you can crack that, then obviously you have the ability to consolidate space. I can tell you, I would say almost all the client base have now done that because they've been able to get the savings without people feeling uncomfortable that I don't have enough space. Now, over time, what you will find is, and we're already seeing that the demand for rooms and collaboration spaces is just out of the roof right now. We see that in the bookings, we see that just on client survey and data. So how do you manage that, right? Today, of course, then you have to plan about how do you reconfigure, but also take a data-oriented approach, right? Because is it people are looking for the 2-seater, those little pods, 4-seaters, or do they need more meeting rooms? I think previously the answer used to be, oh, we're short of meeting rooms. Well, let's go build meeting rooms. No. Today's world, it is, we're short of meeting rooms. Think of it from we're short of collaboration spaces. So the ability to know how many typical people get invited to a meeting, what's the utilization, etc., etc. I think that becomes important. And then because you'll start seeing this, keeping your workspace agile, you don't have to go get another space and spend more money there, right? I think it's sort of reconfiguring the space, but clearly there has been a great opportunity. If you haven't done it, I think you should start looking at that because it has worked out pretty well for many of the companies that have done it. There's nothing, there's kind of nothing as an ideal solution, but at the same time, as you think and plan for the workforce, you also have to think about the workplace, and you also have to think about technology, because I think it really glues the two, right? I love this infographic, that was done by somebody on our team, right? Which basically, and we've used this as we kind of have gone and had conversations with our customers, and we've seen what they've been doing, right? You got to focus on the entry, because the entry point is where I think it's your opportunity to capture footfall, know the number of visitors coming in, know who's coming in, etc. But the ability to do that seamlessly, I think, is becoming super critical, right? And it needs to be part of your technology as well as your physical design plan. Having that common area for that, let's bump into each other, I think becomes important. Many people build these cafeterias, they have one coffee machine and nobody goes there because that one coffee machine always has 5 people, waiting there. Now, if coffee is what everybody loves and it's winter in Australia now, the thought that, okay, we got a cafeteria, we know footfall, how do we put things there that people, spend maybe a little bit more time there, meet and greet with each other, but the ability to do that becomes important. Your desk plans, right? So, one of the things that our clients have done is we've kind of noticed they went with one desk plan, but now it's like really granular, right? But in a way that the employee doesn't feel the toil. It's, well, from an employee perspective, they should just get a message saying, hey, that's your desk, go ahead. If you want to change it, that's fine. but people have created fixed areas, flexible areas, and they've created neighborhoods, etc., which they did, but now done it in a much more agile manner, right? And obviously, like I said, people have changed a few tables and basically chairs around as well, but also using technology to make it that is completely seamless, right? The other is these zones. What I really liked was, as we went and visited the workplaces, pool tables are back, areas for whatever is the local sport, darts and things like that, making sure that it's away from obviously the work area, because it can tend to get a little bit rowdy and noisy as well. That's not a bad thing though in today's world, right? To kind of drive that encouragement, but creating that area. One of our clients has built a mini theater. It's a space for about 15 people. They do a 5 o'clock movie show, I think basically once a week. But I mean, people are looking at innovative things, but this becomes important. Now, knowing that it's available, being able to book it, those are the things you need to think of from a technology point of view. I think the meeting room experience has to be very, very well thought through, because that is going to be one of the top reasons people are coming back. And to me, meeting room is no more that four-walled room. It's any space where people can have conversations. But thinking about, is it too cold inside or is it too warm inside? How do I, obviously, I'm sure you guys have done a lot of work on your collaboration tools and screens and things like that, but the ability to give visibility. One learning we had from one of our clients was, they've got 4 floors. They build these little pods, and they said, it should not be bookable. And I completely agree. It should not, right? But, employee number 1 comes in, starts looking for a pod on the floor that they're in, finds that they're all taken, runs up to the 2nd floor, finds that they are taken, runs up to the 3rd floor, and by the time this person runs up to the 3rd floor is a little embarrassed, because they keep peeking inside to see if somebody's there or can we use it, right? That's not the experience that you want to deliver. Don't book it, but at the same time, you need to give visibility. Is somebody in there or not? Because this person could have just said, you know what? I got 3 on the 4th floor. I'm just going to go over there and I'm done. It's much like the parking system, right? Remember, we used to go round and round and round. If I knew that the parking was in basement 1, why the hell did I reach up all the way to the 5th floor? It's no different from what these pods are that you all are creating, right? So something to be able to think about. But, I talked about employee toil. Think about the user journey. Think about technology interventions at each space. But I've added these little sort of boxes in there, because I think you've got to try and figure out how to make it very, very seamless, right? And that has certainly worked. Now, don't overwhelm them. So bringing all your tech stack together, I think becomes hugely important, right? We just worked with one of the customers in Australia, right, where they just went live, and they did not want people to check in. They said, you know what, we just think it's not great. Fair enough. They had a Wi-Fi system. We said, let's use that for check-in. It's the first location that I've seen where when a person walks in, boom, you're checked in. But it was because we connected to the Wi-Fi system. So reality is, think of your other tech stack that you have, and then how do you bring that together? Bottom line, experience, frictionless, and it's a journey. You're not going to get it right on day 1. But think about toil, experience, and basically those things, right? I think those things become super critical. So I think those were some of the learnings. And look, we have a lot of data, right? So we'll be happy to do these one-on-ones with you to kind of walk you through that. But basically what we're finding is, with all the learnings, transitions are always challenging. It's not easy. And we are making the biggest transition that the workforce has had in like decades, right? Transition is going to be challenging. Change management is critical. The way the communication plans have been made, the way the changes to the workplace have been made, the way technology has been deployed, adopted, utilized, the agility with which people have moved. I think that's the mindset to have, right? And say that change is going to be hard. You know what? We're going to get it done. The cost of not doing anything is very, very high, right? Because then you kind of land up not satisfying employees. Your cost structures go up and all those other challenges happen, right? I think spending time to understand the employee needs is hugely critical, right? And then matching it up with the space needs becomes important. And it's the little things. I came to work, I did not have an EV charger. It was hell for me. Food around the area has become very expensive. I came in and couldn't find anybody in the office. I spent the whole day in the Zoom room, blah, blah. But understanding those, I think, becomes very important, because these are all challenges and problems you can solve. Trust me, you can solve it. Others are solving it. And so that is going to be critical. And then, of course, leveraging on technology, understanding it better to give that seamless experience to your employees becomes very, very important. But you've got to think it through. You've got to plan it through. It's a step-by-step thing. And as you get more understanding of employees, as you want to sort of drive more changes, and as you make space needs, I think the technology needs to kind of be agile enough to be able to help you through that. I remember the world of ERP, which said, here's the ERP system, you change all your processes to suit the ERP system. No. In the world of workplace, you got to understand what your employees need. You got to understand your space better. And the technology has to be agile enough to be able to kind of cater to that change, right? And look, it'll keep catching up, and it'll always be, if not 1 or 2 steps ahead, maybe 1 or 2 steps behind. But that's really the zone that we're sort of looking at, right? Well, these were the learnings. Time for question and answers. Willie, I'm going to hand back to you. I already see there are questions that are in the group. So why don't you shoot? And Jason and I, we will answer those, right? So I'm going to stop sharing now.
Of course. Thank you very much, Dinesh. That was absolutely amazing and very informative. So let's start with a question that came in from Kim. She actually asked, are you still seeing neighborhoods being assigned? And have you seen any shift to completely shared space where users book the space they need dependent on the type of work they are coming in to do?
No, I think, Kim, thank you. And that is absolutely spot on, right? The whole concept of neighborhoods is very data driven. What's the size of the neighborhood? We're still seeing neighborhoods being assigned. I think what's happening is the number of desks per neighborhood, the size of it, that's what's changing constantly, right? And that is evolving. I think as you have more data, as you see more volume of people coming back, you'll start to see that becomes, because still the notion of people wanting to sit together is like very high on the agenda. And with the Australia data, we saw at the peak, it's still 40 to 45%, right? And at the trough is about 10. So that's there. The second is, I think your second question was around, dependent on the type of work. So look, depends how you have configured your spaces. I talked about quiet zones. Quiet zones are very important because when people are under pressure, yes, they want to come back. But remember, at home, they are productive because they are in a quiet zone. And so, they definitely want to be able to sort of choose the right kind of space. Like that, there are a bunch of categories depending on if you have labs and things like that. But I think the first one is probably more prevalent than the other one. We can further look at data and talk to a few people. We're going to take this question back and again come back to you with more information that we can sort of gather.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the second question we received was, how do you manage security and data protection with such solutions?
Oh, so yeah. I mean, if you look at technology today, right, there is the social media world, right, which has its own norms and rules and regulations. What you're trying to create within your workplace is it's the ability for you to have connections established within people, management to people, and people to spaces, right? But these connections are secure. They need to be as secure as any other application you've got in your organization, because that's really your data, right? And that's why you've got to think about when you choose the technology, is it ISO certified? Is it, and all the other criteria that go into it. But I completely agree that there is no compromise in security. The data should be owned by you, not by the provider of the technology. Because in the B2C world, I mean, they have access to all the data, but in the B2B world, it's your data, never share it with anybody, and have full ownership basically around it, right?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dinesh. And another question that we got from Paul was, what is a typical journey of your clients in adopting such technologies? What should they look into while buying these solutions?
So look, I mean, generically, what we're seeing, and maybe Jason, since you're the one selling a whole bunch of this stuff, it would be good to say what typical processes are people using. Sorry, Jason,
you're muted.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, so if you look at many of the clients that we're working with, there's various journeys. And as you guys know, there's different cultures and there's different diversity within organizations, and really when we're working with clients, each customer has their own value proposition. They have the personas that they have built. So I think where it really starts is it's the client creating the personas of the employees that they believe they have in their company. And then it's designing the infrastructure and technology around helping those employees better work with the environment. And really it becomes more of an employee-centric operation where the company is looking for the best ways to get people engaged on those Mondays, engaged on those Fridays. And really the journey, it's changing, especially in this new hybrid world, is it's yet to be fully defined what each organization's hybrid looks like. And, I think that's the exciting part of our learnings is there's multiple ways a person or a team can go to the office. You can have that top-down approach that's manager-driven. You can have employee going to the office at will, meaning they're just picking the days they want to go to the office. You can have a shift where, employees are set on different days during the week. And I think as you look at that journey, the two main factors in that journey are workplace experience and really involving the culture of each location within the community that those offices are located. And I think that's what our customers are centric for. And that's kind of what we focus on when we're consulting.
Thanks.
Amazing.
And just to kind of add to that, right, I would say do a POC. And I know my team's going to hate me for this, but I would say do a POC. Because you have to try it out. You've got to be able to put it in. You've got to try it out. You got to make sure that, it suits your needs, the flexibility and everything else, because it does mean different things to different people. It means different things to different companies, but within locations also, it means different things to different kind of companies basically as well, right? Willie, there's a question back from Kim, and thanks again for asking, right, around the community manager. Look, in the beginning, I was like community managers were used in co-working and they were used on building. But the notion of the community manager coming to the workplace, I think is huge because there are a few things they do. Number one, they have access to the data. So curating the right kind of things to be done on a weekly basis around the events that you're planning, around the things that who's coming back to work, and are there things we can do to little things we can do to drive reconnection between people? That's really that's the prime role of the community manager. It doesn't fall into a sort of an HR function, but it certainly sits somewhere in the middle where the whole goal is connect the people, re-energize the space. And part of it, of course, to your point is, do a little bit of hospitality and event management. Cost of that in your own office is not that high, but it does have an impact. But let me tell you, one consistent feedback across everybody was, guys, the trick of free food worked for a week, it's gone.
Yep.
That's not the draw anymore. Right.
And then I'll also add just for the culture and for, for the journey is make sure that an organization needs to make sure that they're engaging their employees during this process, that have multiple teams working on it. Because what we find is that throughout the journey, there's so much input from the different locations around the world, or especially if it's a global company, there's so much input that the project is changing on a daily basis. So I think that one of the biggest findings that I found with my clients and what we try to tell companies that we work with is make sure you engage your employees early and often throughout the early process, so you can really build those personas and you could build your idea of what the technology is that you guys need to really augment the environment, augment the the buildings that you guys manage. So I think that's one very important aspect I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I think, it's the small thing. I talked about nudges, right? The question is, are you enabling employees to nudge each other? Are you creating nudges for them? See, in the world of technology and apps, right, nudges became very important because they enable you to do something. Just planning that out becomes huge. The community manager can actually think about these things. Technology will enable it, right? Well, there's 101 ways in which we do nudges. But I think the ability to drive that at that location becomes hugely important. So, Willie, back to you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Dinesh and Jason. That's really insightful. And another question that we actually received that I think Jason might be able to also take, since he's been involved with some of the biggest clients in the world as well. You mentioned obviously employee and manager driven work schedules. Can you just give maybe an example of that, Jason, of how you've seen an employee driven and maybe a manager driven schedule?
So like I alluded to in my first answer, the main employee driven one is more of a hybrid at will. I guess that's the word we can call it. It's when employees can choose which days they come into the office. They can choose why they're coming into the office. They can base that choice on maybe collaboration or maybe a Zen space because they got kids at home. And all those aspects go into kind of building the culture around the use of a hybrid application. And then you have a couple of other ways you can go to the office. You can go to the office where you have a split week where the company assigns specific days for on-site and remote work to each employee and to each employee team. That might be maybe assigning them to neighborhoods for those days or assigning them to different floors or a different building. And then you have hybrid manager scheduling where a manager can choose the day that they want their teams to come into the office, which that can promote collaboration and that can promote camaraderie. But also we go back to that flexible where in the surveys, employees want the flexibility to choose the days they come to the office. So I think really, again, it all comes back down to the culture of the organization and that change management of really giving your employees the ability to go to the office. And listen, I think the best way to get the employees to the office is encourage them by making them desire to go to the office. Give them use that events tab, use that community engagement, use the the organizational and the cultural things, because those are going to be the big drawers. It's not going to be telling people to go to the office. I think in the new hybrid world, it's going to be that employee at will. But again, it's important to have technology that's flexible to ebb and flow with the way your organization needs hybrid.
Definitely. Wow, Jason, that's amazing. Jason, also one of the questions that I know we've seen in the past, this wasn't in one of the chats, but a lot of companies have different office spaces, right? So I think one of the things that some companies think that if you do have a platform, it needs to be exactly the same way throughout all locations, but that's not the case, correct?
So again, one thing I think is if you're looking at a technology and you're really trying to augment your environment and your employees' work life, it really needs to be a flexible application that can be managed throughout the organization, where one location manager can have a different feel, or one region can have a different feel than another region. And I think, again, that goes important to each individual location and the culture at the, those environments and those regions of the company, because global companies are very different. One location in New York is way different than a location in Europe, so I think it's important to just make sure the technology that you have is flexible to allow flexibility for all involved in managing the day-to-day.
Amazing. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. And actually, another question that came up was, and also they gave us some insightful press, guys. Well done. So thank you very much, Paul. And they said, you mentioned that change management is pivotal for the move from the transitional workplace to a successful implementation of hybrid workplace. what does success look like, and how do you measure success?
So I think, Billy, to be perfectly honest with you, right, every company has a different view on this. For some people, if they are, some people measure productivity, and what they want to do in the new hybrid world is they don't want productivity to drop, right? It's not so important on what percentage comes back to work versus not. Productivity cannot drop, right? And so if that is your measure, then, everything you're doing here is to make that successful, right? When they're in the office, it shouldn't be like, oh, damn, my productivity dropped from what I was used to, right? So that's the first thing. The second is, for some companies, it's about what percentage of my people are coming back, because that drives creativity, it drives innovation, it drives camaraderie, it drives retention strategies, and all kinds of other things, right? And so keeping a goal in mind, like what's your goal in mind, right? For some companies, it's just the pulse survey, right? It's knowing that hybrid is working. So it means different things to different people, but I think defining goals and having those becomes important, and kind of measuring it, right? But one thing for sure, for companies that have gone around and put all these measures in place that we just walked through, they see a much, much higher level of success relative to the ones that have said, it'll figure itself out. And, we just want to go with the flow. I think that definitely tends to be a challenge. That's where you see tension problems, productivity issues, obviously employees not feeling great about being at that workplace. So I think these things are super duper change management plan in place. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dinesh. And I know we're getting to the hour now, but it was absolutely amazing. And I appreciate everybody that, reached out and all the questions, because this was an amazing showing. It's been great. All the participants were very engaging, and I hope that everybody got the information that they needed. And as we continue this journey, we're going to continue to have one-on-one conversations like Dinesh mentioned with all the clients and all the potential kind of informative meetings that we may have moving along. And we're going to continue to learn more about this space and continue to kind of push the envelope forward when it comes to obviously innovation in the workplace, because it's something that is here to stay, correct, as we see. And I mean, just to kind of debrief what we've kind of gone about, I think three of the biggest things that we really heard about today was, the simplicity of an application or a platform, flexibility, and unity, right? Making sure that everybody feels united and together when it coming into the workplace. So it was great to hear from you guys. Obviously, every time we get to speak, I know I'm lucky enough to work with hand in hand with both of you, but it's just so informative, and so I'm honored to be able to be on this panel with you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Willie, and thanks everybody for attending. We should be in touch. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you all very much. Take care. Bye-bye.